It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning, everyone. We'll talk to the two directors of the New York Working Families Party to begin the show today. Why? Well, there's a lot going on this week that is very relevant to them and very relevant to many of you. In the New York State governor's race, did you hear this? They declined to endorse the progressive challenger who was primarying Governor Hochul. That was her Lieutenant Governor, Antonio Delgado. Within a day after the Working Families Party decided to stay out of that race, Delgado dropped out. The progressive candidate the Working Families Party backed in the New Jersey congressional primary this week has apparently won that race. Archila Mejia, who was the most progressive candidate in that multi-candidate field looking to succeed Mikey Sherrill there, is what they call Tin Cup Day in Albany. You know about Tin Cup Day? That's when the mayor of New York and others go in person to ask the state legislature to approve their agenda. In Mayor Mamdani's case, and backed by the Working Families Party, the mayor wants to increase taxes on the wealthiest New York individuals and corporations, as you know, to pay for universal child care and other affordability priorities. Now, on Monday's show, on that question, we heard an argument against those tax hikes from Steve Fulop, president of the Partnership for New York City. Yes, that's Steve Fulop, who used to be the Jersey City mayor, Democrat. Now he's president of the Partnership for New York City, which represents 300 major businesses in the city. Here's one of the ways Fulop made his case against Mamdani's call and his base's call to tax the rich.
The talking point that he had, Brian, was that we need to move New York tax rates on the corporate side to replicate New Jersey. And coincidentally, I have familiarity with both of those. Currently, when you layer on all of the different taxes for corporations in New York, you are at 17%, which is marginally more than New Jersey already. If you replicate the tax rate for New Jersey, you would move New York City to 22% versus New Jersey staying at 11%. So all I said was that, at some point you hit a tripwire and people do make a decision to leave. If your taxes are 100% higher than you could have them a mile away, people are going to make that decision. It's not overnight, but some people will make that decision and it will be bad for New York.
Steve Fulop, president of the Partnership for New York City, the business group, here on Monday. So we'll hear the other side of that now. We'll talk about Hochul Delgado, Archila Mejia, Tin Cup Day in Albany, and maybe more. As I said, there's a lot going on this week that is very relevant to the Working Families Party. Jasmine Gripper and Ana Maria Archila are the co-directors of the New York Working Families Party, and they join me now. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Brian.
Would you start by addressing Steve Fulop's argument in the clip, Mamdani's pitch to level up New York's corporate tax with New Jersey's would actually make the city's corporate taxes significantly more than New Jersey's, he says, not level, because of additional city taxes that already exist. Do you question the math, first of all, and do you question how that might affect companies' decisions about whether to stay or create new jobs here if they can be cheaper right across the river? To many people, that argument might sound like common sense.
Yes, it would sound like common sense if you don't understand who pays the corporate tax and how. So one, our corporate tax rate is only paid by corporations who net a profit of $1 million or more. So that already eliminates all of the small mom and pop businesses and struggling small businesses. This is the ultra-rich corporations who are netting huge profits. You pay New York's corporate tax rate not because you are based in New York. You pay New York's corporate tax rate if you do business in New York. And businesses like Amazon aren't leaving New York. They're not going to leave our market. It is too big of a sales market for them to go. So Amazon can absolutely afford to pay more in corporate taxes to New York State, and they are not going anywhere. And so being really clear that a corporate tax has nothing to do where an organization or a business is headquartered. It has all to do with if they do business in New York. and they earn $1 million in profit or more. And so that's only taxing the ultra wealthy corporations and the ones who won't leave New York because they know they want to be here. This market is strong and they want to do business here. And we have no threat of them going anywhere. The rich always complain. They're going to leave, they're going to leave, they're going to leave. And guess what? They never leave. This is New York. They want to be here. This is the playground of the ultra wealthy. Corporations want to be here and do business in New York. And it's actually not going to threaten us at all.
But they could be in Jersey City, Philip, the former mayor of Jersey City,
can be in Jersey
and still
City
be in the metro area.
And if you do business in New York, you pay New York's corporate tax rate. If there's no, it doesn't matter where you go. And so as long as you want to operate your business and sell in New York and do business with New Yorkers, you have to pay our corporate tax rate. It doesn't matter if you go across the river. You can be headquartered in Texas. You still can pay the New York corporate tax rate.
How far does that go? Let's say Amazon was headquartered in Texas, which I don't think it is, but let's just say. They ship, obviously, to a lot of New Yorkers because they're delivering to New Yorkers' addresses. They need to pay New Yorkers, New York's corporate tax rate?
Exactly. Yes. That is the way the bill is written. That's the way the law has been. And so I think, Steve Phillips is being misleading about businesses leaving. And we know it's untrue.
Steve Phillips. Yeah, here's one more Philip clip from Monday's show where he argues that raising taxes wouldn't just ding the oligarchs. New York City's high taxes have already begun to deter job creation for regular working families. He says the 300 companies they represent, they may be a lot of the banks, et cetera, what you might think of as the oligarchy, the masters of the universe companies, but they have 800,000 workers in New York, and you want those jobs to stay, and you want them to bring more jobs. But here's what he said about that.
The biggest way to confront the affordability conversation is better jobs, which lead to better paychecks, okay? And you're not talking about the top 1%, you're talking across the board. When places like, use what you said earlier, let's say the oligarchs, and we classify them, but if you talk about their companies, let's say JP Morgan has more jobs for the first time in Texas than New York. Think about that. Goldman Sachs hasn't created a net job in New York for 7, 8 years, they say, right? Those things are indicators that you're not going to confront the affordability conversation if you're not creating more jobs for more people.
Jasmine or Ana Maria, your reaction to that?
The wealthy and the well-connected want to constantly say we need to look out for them at the expense of the working class. And we know that's simply not true. The people who are leaving New York in droves, the people who can't afford to stay here, are the working class New Yorkers, and we need government to look out for them. Let's be mindful that Trump already gave a permanent tax break to the wealthy. New Yorkers alone are getting New York's wealthy are getting a $12 billion tax reduction because of the Trump tax cuts. Not the working class, the ultra wealthy. This idea that we can't expect them to pay a little bit more so that the rest of us can thrive is actually completely unrealistic. They want to continue to sell us trickle-down economics when we know that that's failed year over year and time after time. What we need to do is invest in working class. We need to demand more from our corporations. We need to raise taxes on the ultra wealthy and the wealthy corporations in order for the city and the state to provide more for working class New Yorkers, who are the ones who are feeling pushed to the margins, who are the ones who can't be here, who are the ones who are leaving New York and can't fill jobs because they can't afford to live here. And so this idea that we have to handle the ultra rich with delicate white gloves is simply untrue. And we really need to push back against the scarcity mindset that there's not enough for everybody. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. We live in one of the wealthiest states. Budgets are about priorities. The ultra rich are thriving like never before. They have more money than they can even spend in a lifetime. It is okay for us to ask them to pay their fair share in order to have enough for everyone else to thrive.
But on the specific stats that he quoted there, for those two major investment companies, JP Morgan has more jobs for the first time in Texas than New York. Goldman Sachs hasn't created a net job in New York for 7 or 8 years.
Though that might be, I honestly don't know the facts around that, and that might be factually true. And jobs and industries are always shifting. New markets are emerging, and oftentimes new markets emerge here in New York. And so we're not at a shortage of jobs as much as we're dealing with a shifting globalized economy. Shifts happen, yes, that's real, but that doesn't mean that New York is now all of a sudden falling behind on jobs overall.
One more thing on this, then we'll go to some of the other news. The actual stats for New York City job creation for last year came out recently, and they were kind of shockingly bad. It was only 30,000 something net jobs created last year, and just about all of them were in what's been described as, low-paying healthcare fields, especially home health aides. What does that tell you? And does there need to be a policy response to that?
I mean, we should be careful in New York that we have no low wage paying jobs for any New Yorker, because how could you afford to live here if you're not making more? And so we really need to make sure every industry is paying workers a quality wage. And then we also need to examine how industries are coming to New York and doing business here. But we can't afford to continue to give tax breaks and tax giveaways. We have enough of those. And we really need everyone to come to New York to contribute equally to our economy.
All right. Now, listeners, if you are a Working Families Party member, any opinion about not endorsing Delgado against Hochul for a Democratic primary? We're going to talk about that next. 212-433-WNYC. For anyone else, now that we've had two views this week of the case for and against higher taxes on certain corporations, and the highest income individuals in New York City is part of that, although that wasn't in the particular exchange we played. Does anyone want to weigh in with a reaction? Did you get swayed by either side, or do you have a question? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Call or text. Any Ana Lilia Mejia voters on that apparent primary win for a progressive WFP-backed candidate to succeed Mikey Sherrill in Congress in Jersey, or anything else for Jasmine Gripper and Ana Maria Archila, the co-directors of the New York Working Families Party? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. All right, next topic. After Mamdani's win as the progressive in the mayoral race, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado decided to primary Governor Hochul from the left. This week, you at the Working Families Party declined to endorse Delgado, as you had endorsed Mamdani. You didn't endorse either. And poof, Delgado dropped out within a day. Why did you make that decision not to endorse?
So the Working Families Party has always been focused on using the power of our party to advance an agenda that improves the lives of workers and their families. That is what motivates every political decision we make. That's what animates everything that we do in kind of the daily life of the party. And as we assessed the two candidates, we saw obviously Governor Hochul showing a real willingness to listen to the more than 1 million voters who in New York City voted for Mayor Mamdani and who demanded access to childcare and real progress towards universal childcare. We saw the huge commitment that she made on childcare early, the first week of this year. We also saw her moving on immigration in a moment when we really need our state government to step up its commitment and to protect immigrant New Yorkers from Trump's deportation machine. Those two things, those two very concrete policy decisions that she made early this year really signaled to our party, the members of our party, that the governor was listening and listening to our priorities. On the other hand, we also saw Lieutenant Governor Delgado's campaign run a very spirited campaign to lift up a vision of the state that really prioritizes workers and their families, that talks about access to universal childcare and healthcare and affordable housing. But as the party assessed, and the party has a very robust internal democracy, this decision was made by a body of 200 people from across the state. Ultimately, our members decided that that both, Delgado's campaign was an incredibly sort of important contribution to the conversation, and Governor Hochul's position indicated that we should really continue to build a relationship with her to advance this agenda. And so the decision that ultimately was made was to not endorse either candidate, but instead do a technical designation called a placeholder, so that we indicate we are going to have a candidate for governor, but at this moment we are not making an endorsement.
I'm curious if you were coordinating at all with Mayor Mamdani, who endorsed Hochul last week. As you know, here's the mayor on the show last Thursday as he was rolling this endorsement out.
On day 8 of our administration, Ryan, I stood with Governor Hochul on stage in our city to announce more than $1 billion in funding from the state to deliver universal childcare. And as I was sharing with you earlier, this is the kind of cost that pushes working families out of the city. And that was a commitment that not only fixes the childcare we provide for 3-year-olds to ensure that it can meet the demand of every 3-year-old, but also delivers, for the first time in New York City history, childcare for every 2-year-old.
So was the mayor's endorsement a reason for you? Did you know it was coming in advance? Did you actually coordinate on this? How did that go?
Well, obviously, the mayor's endorsement is an incredibly important signal that there is a sort of coalescing around the governor. That was an important factor in our decision. We, communicate with the mayor's team on a regular basis, and obviously, we are very committed to helping advance the agenda that the mayor ran on. So childcare, freezing the rent, delivering on the buses, making sure that we put in place an approach to safety that is humane, access to food that is affordable for everybody. So all of these elements are priorities of us, and we, of course, looked at the mayor's public endorsement of the governor as a really important element that would shape how we would approach the election. Quite frankly, as you think about challenging the most powerful person in the state, the governor, you have to assess the power of that challenge. And if we have, let's imagine, the Working Families Party supporting the challenger, Lieutenant Governor Delgado, and the standard bearer of the left saying we should support the governor, both messages are going to be incoherent and confusing to voters. And ultimately, the question was, will that help us deliver on the agenda? And at the end of the day, the members of our party, after a very robust debate, our convention was an incredibly robust debate, not a coronation. Our members decided that we needed to not endorse the challenger in this moment and actually keep our options open.
Here are a couple of texts that are coming in on this question. One more supportive. I'm a Working Families Party member and I'm torn. I appreciated Delgado's message and felt he could put pressure on Hochul to raise taxes on the wealthy and provide greater support for Mamdani's agenda, but I understand the danger of burning political capital when Hochul looks as powerful as ever, and she seems to be somewhat open to working with progressives. That's one text. Another one says, I think that the Working Family Party decision to not endorse in the governor's race was a nail in the coffin of Delgado's campaign. I understand if they didn't want to endorse a candidate that didn't have a pathway to win, but we need to encourage primaries, especially when we have a governor who is a Democrat in name only. So you may not accept that Democrat in name only characterization of Hochul, but that second text is emphasizing the importance of primaries, which we will not now have. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, no, we absolutely believe that primaries are important. The Working Families Party is constantly engaging in primary challenges to Democrats who fail to listen or fail to use their power in service of working families across the state. We believe in primaries. And we also believe that at the end of the day, we have to use our power responsibly to accomplish what we set out to accomplish, which is to change the circumstances of people's lives. And the reality is that in New York, we have an incredibly acute affordability crisis. That's what motivated people to go out to vote in historic numbers last year and to vote for Mayor Mamdani and for mayors in Buffalo and Syracuse and Albany and across the state. And we believe that sometimes primaries are the ways that you elevate an agenda. That's the way that you create leverage, and sometimes they sort of exhaust the resources and the energy. Sometimes they demonstrate that there is an enough, like a big enough coalition. And quite frankly, as we looked at this election, some of those were the questions that ultimately shaped our decision. Is Antonio Delgado going to break through, even though he has been running for 6 or 7 months? Is the agenda that we are trying to advance going to actually gain momentum with a challenge, or do we turn our attention to doing the pressure, the other forms of pressure that are available to us and that are important and that we continue to do? You just heard Jasmine make the case about why it is so important to tax corporations and the rich, and we are not stopping that work. Quite frankly, we are actually using our leverage to both challenge Democrats in the state assembly and make sure that we protect the congressional seats that we won last year, make sure that we use our energy to win more congressional seats for Democrats in November, and do all the work that the party does every day to both protect our democracy and win concrete improvements in people's lives.
And with Jasmine Gripper and Ana Maria Archila, co-directors of the New York Working Families Party. Jim in Flatbush, you're on WNYC. Hello, Jim.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just had a question. How does the party expect to do it? Tax the rich, increase revenue without Delgado, without that pressure on the governor? Like, I think it's kind of a pipe dream to think that Hochul is going to be, compliant. I think the reason she was working with progressives was because of that pressure. And I think that despite, whether Delgado would win or not, like having a good primary would have provided some sort of leverage. I don't think you have the leverage now.
Jim, are you critical of Mayor Mamdani in the same way?
I think
for his endorsement.
Absolutely. Yes, I am. I think that it's a mistake to believe that the current landscape is going to last. Like I don't think
mm-hmm.
the mayor retains that sort of glow
leverage?
from the election forever.
The glow. Jim, thank you. Ana Maria, Jasmine, how do you react to Jim?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Jim. Mayor Mamdani is in Albany right now testifying before the state legislature and making the case for why we need to raise taxes on the ultra rich in order to help the budget of New York City and really help New Yorkers thrive. The governor is not by herself the sole determiner of the state budget. We have the Assembly and the Senate as well. This is not the first time we're dealing with a governor who has been, against raising taxes. We've faced this before when Andrew Cuomo was governor of New York, and we needed to raise taxes and raise revenue. And in that moment, the legislature helped to deliver. And so, there is a coalition in Albany today, in addition to the mayors being there for Tin Cup Day, but the Invest in Our New York coalition and WFP members are in Albany today advocating for the Assembly and the Senate to be strong in their demands to raise revenue in the state budget and to pressure Hochul to deliver and comply with those demands. And so we are still fighting. Elections and primaries are one tool in our toolbox. It's not the only tool in our toolbox. And we've leveraged pressure before to move a governor from not wanting to raise taxes to raising taxes. Andrew Cuomo was actually the last governor who raised the personal income tax rate and the corporate tax rate to its existing amount. due to a high pressure campaign on him. And so we will, and it wasn't during an election year. And so we will continue to put pressure on the governor. And we will also leverage our relationships with the legislature in Albany to help deliver more revenue. We are in a moment where the state budget absolutely needs revenue. They need more resources. They can either balance the budget on the backs of working families, or they can balance the budget on the backs of the ultra rich and the billionaires. And I think that's an important question that the legislature is not taking lightly.
Brian,
Listener
can I say
rights.
one thing just
Please.
about, I really appreciate Jim's question because that was precisely the kind of conversation that we had at our convention. One of the things that the Working Families Party is for New Yorkers is kind of the political expression that tries to advance an agenda, and the political party that is perceived and is experienced by New Yorkers as the point of leverage with their powerful government in Albany and across the state. So these was, that question was at the center of our convention. The question of how do we what have we learned from the lessons of previous elections, previous years when the party has challenged the governor and come short? What has been the impact of those decisions? And that's what the Working Families Party is as a space for people, everyday New Yorkers, to come and actually say, how do we use our collective power to improve our lives? And it was questions like that that ultimately got really debated and discussed in our convention, and in the days leading up to the convention. And ultimately the body of the state committee made a decision that to sort of drive us forward.
Listener writes, Ana Maria is making it seem like Hochul supporting universal child care and her support of some immigrant protections is enough. What Hochul is proposing does not go far enough. Listener writes, she is only funding universal child care for 2-year-olds, and the immigrant protections aren't anywhere close to what is being proposed in the New York for All bill. So on that, Ana Maria, or even the question, if Hochul is standing with Mamdani on universal child care for 2-year-olds, it's not universal because it doesn't start at 6 months like the mayor wants, but she seems to be saying they can do that much without a tax increase. So does that negate the necessity for a tax increase to any degree, in your opinion, if the governor is saying we can start with this big piece, childcare for 2-year-olds, without it?
I think the commitment that the mayor made to New Yorkers is to deliver universal childcare. And because New Yorkers showed up in such huge numbers and sent such a resounding message, he was able to negotiate very early on with the governor for a very significant investment. Is it everything? Of course not. Is it universal and permanent? No, we still have to win that. And that is why the tax fight is so, so important. And I want to, I come from the immigrant rights movement. That's how I understood that this country was my home. And I know that the windows of the openings to advance pro-immigrant policies always open and close very quickly. And we pushed the governor very hard to make sure that she would use the window that opened up in the national debate to use her power to put in place some protections. The thing that she did was to cancel this thing called the 287G agreements, which are contracts between counties and ICE to deputize local police and provide local jails. And so by canceling those contracts, that will make it much, much harder for ICE to operate in the counties where those contracts were in place. Now, is it everything? Absolutely not. Do we need to keep pushing for more because we need New York for all? Absolutely, yes. But for anyone who says that this is nothing, I respectfully disagree. And as someone who has been in this movement, I understand how hard fought these victories are. And obviously, the proof will be in the pudding of when people are dropping off their 2-year-old to a childcare center that did not exist before or that existed and cost $20,000 a year. People will experience a significant relief in their life, and that will make it more possible for them to be able to breathe easy as they live in New York City and call this state their home.
We'll continue in a minute with the co-directors of the New York Working Families Party. There's more to get to, including the victory yesterday of the progressive candidate in the New Jersey Congressional District in that primary to succeed Mikey Sherrill. More of your calls and texts. Stay with us.
I am proud to support her reelection. And in this moment, this is a governor who has chosen to govern with the needs of working people in mind. And that is exactly what we have to deliver in what has now become the most expensive city in the United States of America.
Mayor Mamdani here last Thursday, endorsing Governor Hochul for re-election, including in her primary against her challenger from the left, Antonio Delgado, the lieutenant governor, who is now dropped out. As we continue with Jasmine Gripper and María Archila, the co-directors of the New York Working Families Party, and Jake in Midtown. You're on WNYC. Hi, Jake.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Brian.
What you got?
So, real quick, I just wanted to say, without getting too much in the weeds on numbers, I really want to push back on Mr. Fulop's position of cherry-picked details about jobs for J.P. Morgan leaving to Texas, which isn't just J.P. Morgan, to be clear. It's Wells Fargo and a number of other banks, too, that are all moving to Texas.
And let me just say for listeners who didn't hear that clip, which was a half hour ago now, Steve Fulop, who now is the CEO of the Partnership for New York City, which represents banks and other big businesses, arguing against a corporate tax increase in New York and pointing to as evidence J.P. Morgan and what was the other big bank? J.P. Morgan
Wells
Chase
Fargo,
and Goldman Sachs was the one he mentioned.
Goldman.
Not creating any new jobs in years in New York, and rather creating new jobs in Texas, in J.P. Morgan's case. So on that, Jake, go ahead.
So it's a fallacy, I think, to say it's about the corporate tax rate. I mean, Texas has no income tax rate for corporations, but those jobs started to leave during the pandemic when everyone started to work from home. And the reason they're not coming back now has much more to do with AI. Their shift last year, which was in several financial articles, to Texas is a temporary shift for temporary positions, effectively, because even in January, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, without giving exact numbers, said he's going to be shifting away from all of these employees over the next 5 years for AI. So it's sort of a fallacy to say that, like, the income tax rate is what's driving people out of New York, when really we have to think about the broader issue of, like, how are these people going to employ human beings in the future as they eliminate jobs in general, especially a lot of these coding and engineering jobs that they're trying to open up in Texas. And for us in New York here, that matters boots on the ground because, like she said, we're still going to be getting their income tax if we pass this bill because they're still doing business here. And I live just outside the city in Ana Lilia's new prospective district if Ms. Mejia wins. And my wife worked on Mejia's campaign, and we're very excited. And in the same way she needs to address these issues in New Jersey for us, I want to address these issues for New Yorkers and ask the ladies, I love the Working Families Party. What are we doing with this bill and with future bills to also create some sort of guardrails against the complete loss of jobs for AI in the future, in the next 5 years?
Jake, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. You want to take on that question, Jasmine, Ana Maria, AI regulation, and does Hochul, does Mamdani, does the legislature have a position on it?
Yeah, thank you, Jake, for that question. Thank you for you and your wife, helping get Ana Lilia over the finish line and voting for her. She's going to be a great addition into Congress. And bringing up those great points that, like, we are living in an economy in a world that is ever shifting because of AI and its presence, and it's not going to disappear. So we have to learn how to live with it. We have to learn how to protect New Yorkers and protect jobs. One of the things that the Working Families Party is doing and that we announced and launched at the end of last year is some new guarantees that, like, all New Yorkers need some new guarantees from our government. We need guaranteed access to childcare. We need guaranteed access to a home we can afford. And we need guaranteed access to health care we can rely on. And we need New York to be a place where immigrants are welcomed. And so we really need our government to look out for us. and to protect New Yorkers as our economy changes and grows. And then we also need to put some guardrails on how AI is being used, what people can use AI for, and create and have some job protections. I want to be honest that this is a ever-changing, emergent field, and the information here is still new, and so I don't think we have all of the solutions just yet. But it is something we're keeping an eye on, and we're working with other partners who are paying even closer attention to this. I know NYCLU has a number of bills in the state legislature around regulating AI and its use in ways that we protect people's data and information. And so we also need to figure out how it relates to protecting people's jobs and income, and again, making sure that everyone still has access to the things that they need. But our economy is absolutely shifting.
And NYCLU being the New York Civil Liberties Union. On the Mejia primary victory in NJ11, I know you're Working Families Party of New York co-directors. This was in New Jersey, backed by the Working Families Party there, but maybe you can give us a comment. She got a plurality, not a majority of the votes. Does that kind of primary, when a progressive wins, signal vulnerability against Republicans in November? If not in that particular pretty blue district in Jersey, then around the country generally?
Well, first, I want to say how excited we are about Ana Lilia's victory. Ana Lilia is someone who came into this role of a candidate after more than 20 years of a very powerful work history. She used to lead the Working Families Party in New Jersey. And in that role, she led the fight to increase the minimum wage, to pass paid sick days. She went on to, be the political director of Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020, and now leads a national organization that has been waging many of the fights against Trump. So she's someone that comes with like a demonstrated history of fighting for people. And so even though she entered the race late, she was the last to enter, and she had very little name recognition. When she spoke to people, people understood how she had already impacted their lives. And that is what made a huge difference. Plus, a people-powered campaign that, much like Mamdani's campaign, focused on talking to voters directly. One of the things that happened in that race is that AIPAC tried to confuse voters. They poured in millions of dollars to sort of punish Malinowski for not being kind of hawkish enough. Exactly. And it backfired. And so what we read in this moment is, one, that like voters are very open to candidates who actually show up with a history of fighting for them. Voters are very open to people they don't know, but whose trajectory gives them confidence that they're not going to be sort of bending the knee to donors and to kind of the oligarchs that already control so much of our democracy, and that voters are open to these kind of profile of a candidate, not just in a city like New York, but in the suburbs, in Montclair and in Passaic and in this part of New Jersey that is not like a bastion of progressivism, and I think for Democrats. We believe Democrats should be more like Working Families Democrats, more like Ana Lilia, people who actually can very clearly and very succinctly show whose side they are on. Are they on the side of the rich that are always threatening to leave if they don't get more goodies? Or are they on the side of the moms who need affordable childcare, of the workers who need buses that are moving efficiently, of the people who need to be able to afford their rent? And Ana Lilia embodies that commitment, and that is why she was the one that ultimately broke through, came all the way from behind, and broke through in this very competitive special election in New Jersey. And we are extremely excited to see her, and extremely proud that she is a Working Families Democrat.
Before we run out of time, I want to ask you about the contrast between your Working Families Party position on Governor Hochul, which you've been articulating, and the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America New York chapter, of course, more prominent now after their influence on Mamdani's election. And the DSA issued a statement after Mamdani's Hochul endorsement last week. It began like this: NYC DSA does not believe that Governor Kathy Hochul has risen to meet this moment in which working people face unprecedented threats. As governor, she has consistently sided with her billionaire donors while offering working-class New Yorkers crumbs. So is the DSA more consistent on sticking to its values, and the WFP is more like just the progressive flank of the mainstream Democratic Party?
I would say that DSA, first of all, let me just say, we love and admire DSA and appreciate the clarity and the force that they are in offering a space, especially for young people, to kind of use kind of their collective power. And nothing in that statement is something we fundamentally kind of disagree with. In terms of like our critiques of the governor are similar. She has often sided with the wealthiest New Yorkers. We believe that there is something kind of about her politics that is very different from our politics. But the role of the Working Families Party is to actually build a governing majority. And that, by definition, requires working with people from the left and people from the center. And the reason why we say we are focused on building a governing majority is because it is through a majority that we can actually advance an agenda that makes a difference in people's lives. So it is super important to have voices like DSA and some of the DSA electeds, the socialists in office, who sort of hold up the long-term vision, but we see it as our responsibility to actually struggle with the things that are, with the middle, with the gray zone, and to figure out how to bring people along, not just the ones that are already very clearly kind of have a worldview and an ideology that is described as, democratic socialism, but the ones who say, I don't identify with any of those labels, but I definitely want to be able to afford the rent, and I definitely need childcare for my children. And the party is a party that is focused on that. So we work with DSA a lot, obviously, as we worked to develop a strategy that would allow us to keep our side together in the primary election for mayor. DSA was very much at the table, as were many kind of stripes of Democrats, Labor Democrats, Liberal Democrats. And we together worked and held our coalition. And now, as we move into this next phase of New York, where we have a Mayor Mamdani in New York City and we have a Governor Hochul, it is the Working Families Party that can actually kind of bridge the spectrum, and we see it as our responsibility to do so.
Ana Maria Archila and Jasmine Gripper, co-directors of the New York Working Families Party. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.